Welcome to the session on business statistics. In today's session, we will understand index numbers. We will understand what is index number and why index numbers, the purpose and its use, and different types of index numbers and how to calculate the index numbers, and purchasing power, how it is related to certain economic indices, and finally how index numbers can be used over a period of time. And when you do over a period of time, when you use these index numbers, you need to meet certain criteria or adequacy to ensure robustness of using these numbers. Index numbers are pure numbers of business variables and economic variables over several years starting from a base period. You will have examples like BSE index or stock market index, inflation index, GDP, so on and so forth. So when you arrive at these index numbers, you talk of index numbers in the current period with reference to a base period. For example, what is the inflation rate in 2010 and what is the inflation rate in 2011, so on and so forth. So you treat 2010 as a base period, or start with 100, whatever be the inflation rate, and you compute the current period index, and that is what is called the index number of the current period with reference to a base period. Now let us understand the purpose and use of index numbers. Index numbers' purpose is to recognize how a particular business variable or an economic variable, how they move over a period of time, to understand what is the trend or how the behavior of the variable, how it is going to be in the future. It is a measure of change indicating over several periods. So much so it's also a device. Index number calculation methods will help us to calculate the indices, and it's a measure of device, and the purpose of index number is to recognize how the variations are changed over a period of time. There's an enormous usefulness of index numbers in economic environment, and several economic parameters with their index numbers are useful in future prediction, how the economy is going to be, how the macroeconomic situations will be, how the country is going to develop over a period of time. Besides, it helps in budgeting, it helps in planning. For example, you talk about a large infrastructure project over several years. There are several materials and commodities and services are used, and you need to plan well in advance, or you need to know how much is going to be the capital outlay. For all these things, these indices will help, because you would have studied these indices over a period of past several years, which will help you to project in the future. So there is an immense use of using index numbers in various spheres of life, facets of life, and so on and so forth. Especially index numbers are very useful in economic situations. As a matter of fact, indices or index numbers are called economic barometers of the country, to understand the growth of the country, the healthiness of the country, and so on and so forth. These index numbers will help us in calculating or understanding how the indices in the past and how it is going to be useful in the future. These can be calculated and then used for several business parameters. When you use these indices or index numbers for economic parameters, that is one sphere of life. The other one is you can have special index numbers for different entities, for manufacturing, for agriculture, for real estate. They are all very useful in terms of useful planning and then going ahead with a sound background of what is going to be the resource requirement, like that. The purchasing power helps you to understand what is your money worth, or the money you have in your hand, how much you can command the goods and services will be a useful phenomenon, and that is what is indicated by purchasing power. Adequacy. To know about adequacy of index numbers, there are three tests: time reversal test, factor reversal test, and circular test. The index numbers, if they satisfy these tests, then you can understand it. The numbers are quite robust and they can be used for your extrapolation and interpolation calculations of various index numbers for various periods. With this brief introduction, we will move on to the PowerPoint presentation, understand more about the index numbers, how to calculate, and what are the intricacies, and then see a couple of examples and move on. Now let us understand index numbers. Index number is ratio of current period value of the variable to a base period value expressed as a percentage. Index numbers are widely used in economic variables or economic indicators known as economic barometers of the country. However, it doesn't stop one using and developing indices for various business variables of organization and enterprises like say raw material, wages, annual income, gross domestic product, so many things. Manufacturing vertical, sales and marketing, finance, shares, balance sheet parameters, profit before tax, profit after tax, like that. There are so many business parameters for which indices can be developed. Why index numbers? Business variables change over a period of time. For effective business decision and successful operation, one need to know how much change has happened now with respect to the past, that is a time frame, so that one can predict the expectations in the future to a reasonable extent. It helps in forecasting, planning and budgeting for the future, resource planning, so many things. Index numbers help recognizing such changes by expressing the business variables in a relative term pegging on a time scale. Index numbers, a measure of change, is a device to measure change, and series of index numbers or indices represents the process of change. One can really study how the variations of a particular index keep moving from a past period to the current period over a period of several years. Use of index numbers are very many. It acts as an economic barometer, as I already told you, reveals trends and tendencies, helps in policy formulation, measures the purchasing power. You can deflate values to recognize the real value, and you can interpolate, extrapolate. So many things can be done with the help of index numbers. Now let us understand a little more about index number by way of an example. Let us consider inflation index, a composite index of essential commodities for livelihood. Milk, bread, egg, groceries, vegetables, power, transport, all these things are part and parcel of our life, and this is what is reflected in the inflation index. Rather, we talk about inflation. Inflation is 7%, inflation is 10%. Now let us see by way of a simple example and understand all elements of index numbers.